This week, new polling data suggests an alarming number of American voters believe the assassination of Donald Trump is a good thing. A growing debate among Christian families. Should parents consider their kids missionaries, foregoing private or homeschool education and keeping them in public school to share their faith instead? And as the nation's birth rate declines, a growing number of young Americans say they're simply too poor to consider having a family. These stories and plenty more on deck this week on The Lion. Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion. Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capital, and your kids. I'm Chris Stegall. And now let's meet our panel. Some of the men and women behind the stories at readlion.com. Josh Mann, our managing editor. Michael Ryan, executive editor. And Valerie Cabana, media contributor here at The Lion. Welcome, panel, as we dive into it. And the headline this week that 1 in 4 young Americans say the economy is just too rough. It's too poor. They're too poor to have kids. And, you know, Josh, the old saying that I remember when I was thinking about first having kids, my parents have said it. I think it's been said for generations. If you wait to have kids until you have enough money, you never have enough money. But is this different somehow?
I don't think it's really different. I do think the younger generations are handling it differently. You look back at the Great Depression era and what that generation came through, and the family was continuing to be a staple of American culture and Western society. But we've seen kind of an assault on the family from the left, and this is a little bit different. So some young people, they're worried they can't afford kids, but when you look at various studies on Gen Z and millennials, they're also very ambivalent towards having kids. They kind of don't care. I think personally that the generation, this kind of social media generation, is maybe a little more self-absorbed, a little more career-oriented. I think there's a lot of cultural things going on. But there's no better time to have kids than when you're young. Our article brings up a lot of different reasons and facts that having children young can be beneficial, not only physiologically for a woman, but also even for the health and establishment of the family, the house, the household, wealth, all of those kinds of things. So I would challenge younger generations to not put it off. We need healthy families in this country if we're going to thrive.
Yeah, Michael, is it a self-interest, self-indulgent decision that young people are not having kids, or is it really a matter of the economy in your view?
Well, it could be a number of things. And I was one of those that got the advice that said, wait till you can afford it to have children. And I can tell you, it's the best advice you'll ever get that doesn't work. Because, if most of us wait till we can afford it, we'll never have kids. If you truly can't afford it, that's one thing. But if you're seeking meaning in life through money or material things, that's a huge mistake. And the fact is that kids bring the most meaning in life anyway. And another reason that some young people are avoiding children is climate change. And I think that's another huge mistake. We've been told for decades that by now we'd be swimming with the polar bears anyway.
Valerie, I'll ask you because I know someday you have, with this come up on multiple shows now, you aspire, I believe, to have a family. You've shared with us before. Not yet, though. Do you guys talk about money at the house? Is that a reason you'd hold off?
Yeah, it is, actually. And we are really working on setting ourselves up for financial success. And I do know that that is an issue. Maybe it's Bidenomics, if we're being honest. But cost of living is way up. Everything is way up. Now, we don't say we're too poor to have children. We know that that's not our reality, but we know if we can make a few more notches in some different areas, paying off debt, and then a lot of people want to be in a house by the time that they have their children. These are all factors that people are thinking about. For us, it's not going to delay it very long, but I can see and understand why other people might.
Well, here at the Herzog Foundation, it is a special time of year. We always love September because that means the Excellence in Christian Education Awards. And we profile roughly 12 different teachers of the year and now some homeschool co-ops as well. Just recently, they were awarded their honors in Washington, D.C. And Josh, you guys have been profiling these teachers.
Yeah, and the latest one is Julie Pickard, who is at a Christian school in Des Moines, Iowa. And I love so much about her story, but she teaches middle schoolers Bible and art, and she talks about how it's messy. And I couldn't help but think that's a lot like life as a middle schooler. It's kind of messy. And her heart is to mentor these young people and help them own their faith, to begin to think about their faith as their own, to embrace Christianity and to thrive as young budding adults. And I think she's actually the middle school teacher every Christian parent dreams of, somebody who will invest in their kid, love them for who they are, and really challenge them to develop a Christian worldview. The other thing that she talks about that I would want to highlight is she warns that every kind of education, every kind of school has a worldview that it is passing on to the kids in that school. And so, Christian schools like to talk about how they give kids a Christian worldview or a biblical worldview, which is really important. But she warns that public schools also are giving a worldview, and oftentimes it's hidden and it's unnamed. And so I think it's a good warning for parents to just be involved in their kids' education, to understand and to ask themselves, what is my school teaching my kid?
I know we were both honored to be a small part of that this past week, Valerie, in Washington, D.C. You were there with the teachers, as I was as well, and just an impressive bunch. But if you want to speak specifically to Julie or any of them.
Yeah, these teachers are absolutely incredible. The things that they are doing within their Christian schools are revolutionary for Christian education. And I think about it, I went to public school, but these teachers, they're doing things that I never even got the opportunity to do. And so I would really encourage you, go read the stories that we've written on these teachers and follow along. The hashtag is ECE Awards. And we're just really thankful and grateful that we get to celebrate these teachers and homeschool co-ops.
That brings me actually to a great question. It's sort of a companion question, and it's one of the stories at readline.com this week, Valerie, and I'd love you to jump off on that. That is the notion of public schools and kids being missionaries in the field, if you will. And I'd throw in teachers as well. We've run into this discussion before that, hey, if all the good Christians leave public school, then what does that leave the non-Christians who could benefit from hearing the gospel? So that's a focus at the story at readline.com.
Absolutely, and this has come up a lot. I've heard the argument made in my own household, and the teachers and the students, it's a very different situation. I would ask the question, would you leave your 5-year-old at home by themselves? No, you wouldn't, because they're not mature enough to fend for themselves and to take care of themselves. The same goes with their spiritual walk and journey. These kids are not fully set on their firm foundation. There is concrete that is hardening, but it is not yet hardened, if we can use that for a reference. And so you wouldn't send your kids to the wolves. And a really great quote, and I'm paraphrasing here, it talks about how we know that our kids can go out into the world and they can be a witness, but you would never send them into harm's way intentionally. And I absolutely love that, because it is so true. And I will add on, it depends on where you live. It depends on the community. Do you know the teachers where your kid is going to school? Do you know what their values are? I know that in my experience, most of my teachers in public school, because of the town I lived in, were Christian. And so if we have Christian teachers, then it is a different situation. And as far as Christian teachers in the public school system, it's different because their foundation is set already. And they do have an opportunity to make an impact, although they can't actually mention the name of God. And so it is a conversation to be had, but my answer would be no. Kids are not missionaries, and they should not be thrown to the wolves in a school where they're going to teach them different ideological things like genderqueer and other things that just don't belong in the public school system.
It's an interesting question, Michael. I've heard it before. As Valerie pointed out, some parents say, hey, listen, if all the great Christians pack up and run out of public school, then who's left to share the good news? What do you say about it?
Well, all I can tell you is that my parents didn't send me to a public school to make the other kids better. That was not my mission. I think it's interesting what Valerie talks about, that teachers can be missionaries too. I had a chance to talk to a Christian university education student recently who exactly wanted to do that. She wanted to be kind of a missionary in public schools. I bade her well, but I did indicate to her that her hands are going to be tied in a lot of ways. And the fact of the matter is, some of our Christian teachers of the year at the Herzog Foundation have been public school teachers in the past, and they find it very liberating to be at a Christian school and stifling to have been at a public school. You know, this has become the number one issue probably for parenting, and that is, do your public schools share your values? You need to ask that question. It used to be a matter of convenience, whether the school's close to your home. Is it safe? But I think the value question has risen to the top. Does your school share your values?
Personal question. Josh, I know you've shared with us before, your kids are homeschooled, but do you view your children as missionaries?
No, I don't. I view them as growing disciples that are young in their faith. I like Valerie's metaphor of wet concrete. I mean, they are setting that their faith is being set up. And I think that what parents have to do, no matter what, and let's face it, there are going to be some parents who they don't have school choice in their state. They can't afford to send their kids somewhere. Maybe both parents have to work, or at least they think that they both have to work. I would say parents have to be involved. In this story, we have two perspectives. We have those and the arguments for not letting kids go into public schools. And we also talk to some moms who give their reasons for sending their kids to public schools. But you know what those moms have in common? They're super involved. They know exactly what their kids are being taught. In one case, in a Wisconsin school, the mother talks about how it's a small town. It's, basically the radical ideology hasn't come in yet, she says. And so, these are unique cases, but these are parents who know what's going on. The time has passed where a parent could simply assume that they can send their kid to the local public school and everything will be okay. So bottom line is parents have to be involved. That's how we approach it in my house. And, I'm fortunate to have a wife who is a gracious and talented educator, and our kids are thriving. But parents have to think hard about this and, understand what's happening in public schools today.
Shifting to the politics of the day at readline.com is a story that Michael has authored, and it's not good news. Gallup has recently studied this and said that many Democrats and Republicans, self-identifying, actually view the other party as some of the biggest threats that the nation faces, bigger than even outside entities like China or Iran. But Michael, you've specifically written about Democrats who think the idea of assassinating Donald Trump is A-OK. Not good news.
Yeah, you've heard the term shock poll a lot, but this is a shock poll. This is from Scott Rasmussen's Neapolitan News Institute. He found that 28% of Democrats think the country would be better off if President Trump had been assassinated. Another 24% aren't sure. So that's a majority who are open to the idea of President Trump being assassinated being a good thing. That's just shocking. Former Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill was on MSNBC, and she talked about the fact that she thinks Trump is worse than Hitler and Mussolini, worse than a mass murderer and the guy who started World War II, because he doesn't actually want to conquer other countries. He just wants to conquer political ambition, which is a really bizarre argument that somebody who doesn't want to conquer other countries is worse than Hitler. Be that as it may, this may be part of why, and I detail in my story a lot of the rhetoric on the left via Trump. This may be why 2/3 in a new poll say that they expect yet another assassination attempt on Trump, and it may be in large part because of this sinister, dangerous rhetoric.
Just briefly, Michael, on Claire McCaskill specifically, years ago when I hosted a talk show in Kansas City, she was a guest of mine. And while we differed ideologically, she was always considered sort of a charming, somewhat moderate left-of-center Democrat. Never sounded as aggressive as she sounds today. And I am just curious, I guess we can't get into her head, but what do you attribute that kind of language to today? She was a United States Senator. Now she's a commentator on cable news. Where does that come from, do you suppose?
All I can guess is the herd mentality. These talking points are sent out there by people on top of the Democrat Party, and they get repeated almost verbatim by so many people on the left in the Democrat Party, on the leftist media, and it just becomes an echo chamber, and it's just really a dangerous phenomenon.
Valerie, your thoughts on this?
You know, I never thought we'd have to say it, but hey, murder, it's not a good thing. And unfortunately, we justify it in the name of abortion or in the name of Donald Trump of big orange man bad. And so I like to point things back to scripture, and in 1 John 3:5 it says, anyone who hates a brother or a sister is a murderer. And you know that a murderer has no eternal life residing in them. And so if you hate someone, and this is what we're seeing, people hate him to the point of murdering him. But if you hate someone in your heart, the Bible tells us that you are already a murderer. And so stop.
Josh Mann, the story in the Chicago public schools is, I think, a familiar one to cities big and small all over the country, and that is dealing with an influx of migrants, either here illegally or legally. But in the Chicago public schools, they're now dealing with them in probably not a terribly constructive way in terms of the way they're grading them.
Yeah, and you know, Chicago's not the only city who's experienced an influx of migrant students, undocumented students who all suddenly show up in the public school system, and now they have to be instructed. They don't know English. But the shocking thing in this story, now this was a WGN radio interview with a number of teachers who spoke on the condition of anonymity because, you know, they feared reprisal. These teachers said that they were instructed to give these students no lower than a 70% mark for any class and basically pass them on to the next grade. Now, we have to understand Chicago is kind of reeling in an old sanctuary city policy that really, I think, is to blame for what's happened, in addition to the Biden-Harris immigration policies. But to think that these kids are just being passed and then passed to the next grade, they're kicking the can down the road. This is a huge problem. And a lot of these students are in minority communities where there are already concerns about resources and learning loss and all sorts of things after the failed COVID policies. And so, you know, it's a huge domino effect. It speaks to failed immigration policy from Biden and Harris. It speaks to poor immigration policies in the city of Chicago, but also to think about the position these teachers are in, to basically lie and to pass these kids on to the next grade. And it's certainly not serving these children.
And to that point, Michael, the children who are there legally and residents of the school district, I can't imagine would benefit from this policy either.
No, I mean, when all the resources are going to the immigrant children who may not speak English, and most of them don't, that hurts everybody in the classroom. So it's not illegal to come here illegally. Everything's free when you get here. You don't have to know English, and grades mean nothing. This is the message. But the message is also, you can't fail here. It's not possible. You're better than anyone else, and laws and rules don't apply to you. You know, this doesn't help the kids, as Josh said. This, by passing them along and not achieving grade level. I mean, some of them are achieving kindergarten level and being passed on in these upper grades. Nobody benefits when the system cheats for the kids.
These stories and a lot more at readline.com this week. But before we wrap up, we always like to ask the panel their favorite stories, one they'd call particular attention to at readline.com. Valerie, we start with you.
Yeah, so it's the Our Kids Missionaries. As someone who's been a missionary, I love this topic. I think it's really important to discuss and to know and to be aware of what you might be sending your kids into when you're discussing what the future of their education looks like.
Josh Mann.
We had a story about artificial intelligence and an interview with a guy who is pretty bullish on it as a Christian. And I think it's important that Christians start to think about artificial intelligence and to understand the potential impact it's going to have on society.
Michael, your favorite this week?
Yeah, my favorite by far is Adam Wittenberg's story on missionary kids in public schools. This, again, it goes back to the issue of whether your school shares your values. People have got to pay attention to this.
Check it all out and so much more at readline.com. That, for us, will do it this week. As I said, be sure to keep up to date on all the latest news every day. We're constantly updating it at readline.com. And for all of us at The Line, until next time, thanks for downloading the show.